currently no environmental caucus in the legislature, has never been. And so, if nothing else, if I can start an environmental caucus that begins to take root and grow and increase its influence, so that people will start, corporations that are clean, that are forward thinking, that are part of the green the green economy, the new Green New Deal, that kind of thing. Those sorts of, please bring some lobbyists up to Tallahassee that actually, we can take some money from, and that have them write our bills for us and have them be good for the people and for the land and for, the economy of Florida. Right now, the Republicans have just brought Florida to the brink of collapse, economically, ecologically, public health-wise, and the water. The water is in crisis on every level, right from the Floridan aquifer, which is hundreds of feet down, all the way up to the springs, the Florida springs, to the rivers, lakes, reservoirs. It is all the way up to the top of the phosphogypsum stacks, the gyp stacks. Our water is contaminated and corrupted at all levels. They're so desperate to find ways to deal with their wastewater, our wastewater, I suppose, that they're talking about just injecting it into the aquifer.
Oh my God!
Yeah, we call it toilet to tap. And
my Lord!
Deal is, well, it's not like raw sewage. It's treated down a secondary or tertiary level, and it's not that bad, but it's still sewage. It's still full of nutrients and everything. And it's just it's a real drag. Their rationale is to inject it under pressure around the edges of the state, so it will keep the salt water at bay, create pockets of high pressure to keep salt water out. The Floridan aquifer is gradually becoming salt water, and the lower Floridan aquifer is salt water. It's fossil seawater, and which is an interesting concept. Fossil water. It's been there for so long, but it's just a and then they give the Florida Constitution says that the water belongs to everybody equally. Everybody has rights to the water. What that means is, it sounds noble, right? It sounds great. It sounds egalitarian and everything. A little black sharecropper can have just as much right to the water as Mosaic does. But what that means is, somebody like Nestle comes along with the capacity to pump billions of gallons out. They have every right to it, and they don't have to pay anybody for it. They just take it and bottle it and sell it at a huge profit, and with millions of pounds of single-use plastic waste on top of everything. So, single-use plastic waste. One of the singular achievements of this legislature has been the preemption bills that they've passed. There's counties and cities that want to ban single-use plastics, even drinking straws, for God's sake. It's not a hardship to have no drinking straws, but the plastics lobby got its hook into the Republican legislators, and they passed a preemption bill that says, oh, you can't do that. They're preempting the towns. Republicans used to be all about home rule, but this new bunch of ultra-extreme radical conservatives is such that they don't care about home. They don't care about anything. They exist. They certainly don't care about the people. People are just sort of an annoying and necessary, a means to an end. You tell people lies and they vote for you. So that's the way they sort of view it. It's a very dark, cynical view. But anyhow, they were like, home rule. We don't care about home rule when it goes against our conservative agenda. And so they're banning these communities from banning single-use plastic, and meanwhile the stuff just keeps building up and building up and building up. Tons of unbelievable quantities of it out there in the oceans. So there's that. Okay, so one of the things I want to do is repeal the Byrd-Harris Act. And if you all give me a majority in the State House, we will repeal the Byrd-Harris Act. Then I have an omnibus public health bill. These environmental bills are in my campaign website. I haven't filled in the rest of them yet because I'm still fleshing them out. I had a long conversation in a Zoom in a town hall with like 70 people with Dr. Matthew Edlund, who was just an MD who's been trained in psychiatric epidemiology and epidemiological psychiatry. I forget which way it goes, but it's the same thing. He was so extraordinary. I've had 2 conversations with him now, and it's given me the bones of a really good COVID policy. But the omnibus public health bill would include dealing with the radioactive phosphogypsum studies, mountains, 24 huge mountains, highest thing in the southern Florida landscape, getting toxics out of our drinking water. Right now, Mosaic is putting millions of pounds of heavy metals and radionuclides into the Peace River and the Alafaya River, which are drinking water sources. And the way they get away with it is they dilute their waste until it meets water quality standards, and then they're able to let it go. There's no requirement for a measurement of mass, overall mass. I've taken some core samples from various spots on the Peace River, and I'm about to have them analyzed for heavy metals and gross alpha, which is basically uranium and radium, to see if in fact there is an indication that there's a mass of toxic waste in the Peace River and in the harbor. So that would tell us much, and so I would start regulating. Okay, so Florida's FDEP, Department of Environmental Protection, which some people think says don't expect protection, but it is that the FDEP is operating under delegated authority from the feds, and they're regulating and they're supposedly enforcing, which is a laugh, the Clean Water Act, various sections of the Clean Water Act, and one of them is the toxic waste effluent. And so the way the Clean Water Act works is if a state wants to go more stringent than the federal standards, they're free to. And so this state here, Florida, all of a sudden, if you give us a majority up there, we will go more stringent. We will require analysis of the mass, the overall mass of toxic waste being put into our waterways and many of our drinking water sources. The nutrient criteria for nutrient pollution, essential, and numeric criteria that can be enforced. But there's nobody left at the FDEP who will do the enforcement because Rick Scott fired them all. One of his first acts as governor, he fired every enforcement staffer on the FDEP and a lot of the scientists also. So for 10 years, the FDEP took virtually no water samples, did no water analysis, no monitoring, and just let big agriculture let it rip. And within a few short years, there was so much nutrient pollution in Lake Okeechobee that virtually the entire surface of the lake was covered with blue-green algae, and then it rained. And then the Corps of Engineers was required by law to let the stuff run down both directions, and there was the beginning of that horrific, harmful algae bloom that extended all the way up the coast to Tampa Bay and beyond, and also afflicted the Indian River Lagoon and parts of the East Coast as well. Unemployment. Unemployment's insurance. It's insurance. People pay into it. And Florida's been dragging its feet and delaying and obfuscating and everything. It's criminal. Some heads need to roll for that. Things like unemployment are not an entitlement. They're a thing that people have bought and paid for. It belongs to the people. They have to get their unemployment paid stat, and the levels of payment for unemployment in Florida are pathetic. Nobody can live on that. Nobody. So let's see, repeal preemption. The whole COVID section of this omnibus public health bill. Masks have to be mandated statewide. They have to be mandated. And we got to have test and trace. contact tracing and testing, much more extensive than it is now. I have on our Facebook page, the campaign Facebook page, a series of graphs that I pulled off the internet of New York versus Florida. You know, when New York was the first place where COVID really exploded, one of the first real, it was a bloodbath. It was horrible. I felt so horrible. It's my home state, you know. My daughter.
Andy.
Yes.
Andy, I got to interrupt here, and we're going to have to. We got about less than 2 minutes left, and what I want you to do, because I want to have you back again next week, because we got so much more to talk about. Especially, I want to chime in and talk about unemployment. And what we're going to do, I'm going to give you in about 1 minute and 30 seconds here for our listeners this week. I want you to summarize, and then we're going to have you back next week, and we're going to continue this because we got a lot more to cover in your campaign here, and especially about what you were just going into about the COVID, because we wanted to cover that whole area. That's a critical area. So, I've taken part of your time. So, within a minute here, about 60 seconds, summarize, and then we'll bring you back next week to talk more.
All right, Steve. Thanks. You got me going here. Okay, so in a nutshell, New York got hit first. It had just horrendous amounts of mortality, and we all know that whole story. Everybody was caught by surprise. It was like in March and April. Nobody had protective gear or anything like that, but they got it under control by being reasonable, by being driven by the scientists, and they squashed it. They flattened the curve. The curve went down almost to nothing, into single digits, and it was after that curve went down to single digits in New York that Florida's COVID-19 surged. In other words, the Republican ideologues that we are forced to live with learned nothing from New York's example. They just laughed and snickered. They were all smug about how we're going to keep them out of the state and make them go into quarantine. And then we got nailed. And so and we still haven't gotten it under control. So anyhow, let's talk about it again next week.
We will. Thank you so much, Andy. And it's been great having you this week, and we look forward to having you back again next week. And thank you for listening, and we hope you have enjoyed today's discussion. This has been Coastal Progressive and Rainbow Forum on Society Bites Radio, and I've been your host, Steve Ryan. Thank you again, Andy.
You bet. Talk to you soon.